Hello and welcome to Archaeolexy, a working title, but one that we're going to stick with, where we look back at some of our favorite words that we've done while we're taking a short break in January of 2022, for anyone listening back to our listens back. Anyway, today we revisit episode 8, where I'm talking about log.
So this has come up a lot with us, where one of us does a thing and the other one comes to do their turn to do the thing, and they go, oh, well, I
feel like my thing is really crappy now.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring us way down to earth because my word is log.
Okay.
And so again, something that has come up in our discussions in the past has been this idea that at one point someone must have just made a noise, and the noise was distinctive enough and was contextual enough that it became a word.
Yes.
And so and that just became the word for the thing. And there's plenty of examples of these ancient words that nobody can bother tracing back. You can find it in Sanskrit or Indo-European or Proto-Germanic or whatever what have you. But beyond that, it just became a thing.
Do you have one of those?
Well, this seems to be one of those, and this is the first time.
So exciting!
This is the first time that I can remember having found the OED to kind of identify that same idea, that notion that this is just.
I am currently ruffling pages.
It says. Let's see here. The conjecture that the word is an adoption from the later stage of Scandinavian due to the Norwegian timber trade is not without plausibility, but is open to strong objections on phonological grounds. It is most likely that clog and log arose as attempts to express the notion of something massive by a word of appropriate sound.
Oh, it's the words that aren't onomatopoeic, but they kind of are.
Exactly. It's the word of onomatopoeia, but for a thing and for its nature rather than its
Ryan,
noise.
This is, how can you possibly think that this is not the thing? This is like pay dirt. Words.
This is perfect. So yeah, someone just on and so clog is basically almost a synonym for it. It's just another word that has become this just a big lump of something. There's a relation to I believe it was Norwegian word or a Dutch word where log just means clumsy, heavy, or dull, just a thing, and it's related to the word lug in English. Oh, you big lug!
Ah, nice.
You big lump of whatever. You're just big and heavy and kind of either dumb or cuddly, depending on how affectionate you are towards the person you're calling a lug. But just this big sound. It reminds me of Douglas Adams in the Hitchhiker's Guide series, where a whale is simply brought into existence by the infinite improbability drive, and he's sorting out what things are called. So he looks down and sees the ground and calls it ground because it's big and round, ground. I'll call it the ground, and then he hits it and dies.
Yeah, that's it.
But that idea. But apparently that's how we got the word log. What was interesting to me, because the one sense of log is just a big tree trunk, usually a fallen tree trunk, or a big, heavy, immovable object. But of course, to log something, or you keep a log.
Yeah, sure.
A log book. So it's like, well, where did that come from?
I've often wondered about that, to be honest. I've often wondered if it was to do with like the timber trade and keeping records or something like that. But yeah, the captain's log, stardate, whatever. You just use that word without really considering how it also means a lump of wood.
Well, not to worry, fearless co-host and tens of listeners. It's the closest and most appropriate use of it now, probably, other than the actual official use of like a logbook on a ship, would be a captain's log from Star Trek, because a log was an early, and adaptations of it, I believe, are probably still being used in certain senses and places, was an apparatus that was used by ships to measure the speed and progress of their travel.
One wrote down what was going on with a log.
Exactly. So a log was just literally a chunk of wood that was weighted down with iron or something like that, but not enough that it sank, but that it was enough to resist being towed along, that it would just stay in one place. So they would drop it into the water. The log would stay there on the surface of the water, but where it was dropped. And then they would release a line that had sort of measured intervals marked on it, whether by knots or by markings or some other such technique. And at the same time that someone was letting the log out, there was another person with even originally just a sand, like an hourglass, a sand timer. And they would time a certain interval, and then they would haul the log back in and count the number of intervals that had been pulled along the line as the ship went along. And then they could determine the speed and the distance that they had traveled in that time. And then so they would write that down, and that became
the logbook.
The logbook. So the logbook eventually became all the ongoing kind of operational day-to-day logistical things on a ship, but primarily all surrounding the key information with navigation is where are we going and how fast are we getting there. And so that was the log. So then that's where logbook came from, and eventually shortened to log. And now log is just being used by drivers and everyone else, just people. Like live journal could have been just live log if it didn't sound so lumpy and clunky.
When you're in a boat too, where you're going and how fast you're getting there, those are the two things you need to know.
Absolutely. That's everything.
There's not much else going on there. You definitely want to write those things down. You definitely want a device that would help you to track that. That's amazing.
So that's where, So
I'm
log.
also very much thinking of the log lady in Twin Peaks.
Yes, that's
never hear the word without thinking of that.
And the other sort of pop culture thing that pops into my head immediately is the song from Ren and Stimpy, where they
I'm not hugely up on Ren and Stimpy.
They produced you can be forgiven for that for sure. But it was their kind of riffing on the Slinky, and so they had devised the jingle was what rolls downstairs a loner in pairs rolls over your neighbor's dog. It's great for a snack and fits on your back. It's log, log, log. So, but they had a whole commercial about it. It was. Anyway, that's the first thing that comes.
Do you know, Ryan?
Mind.
That's taken up space in your brain that something else is not able to fit in for.
Yeah, and I will not let it go.
Well, yeah, I kind of feel the same. It's like who holds back the electric car? Who makes Steve Gutenberg a star?
Exactly. You can't. Some things you just need to have.
You have them and you hang on to them even though they're dusty and old.
And it's Ren and Stimpy is an interesting thing because there are two things that I remember from Ren and Stimpy, and one of them is that, and the other one is the Royal Anthem of the Canadian, or the Anthem of the Royal Canadian Kilted Yaxman, a song that they did, which was to the tune of God Save the Queen, which has ruined
any sporting event for you.
Or at least made very difficult attending, for instance, Remembrance Day ceremonies. When they play, which is one of the only times I hear God Save the Queen in a Canadian context, but it makes it very difficult for me because in my head, I am hearing the words of the anthem for the Royal Canadian Kilted Yaxman, and it is just utterly and profoundly inappropriate.
What are the words? Come on.
It's our country reeks of trees. Our yaks are very large. Our country
reeks of cheese. Our
yaks are really large, and they smell like rotting beef carcasses. And it just goes on from there. And it's and so there's me struggling. I mean, I'm hoping that what I'm conveying on the outside at these ceremonies is reverence to the point of trying to muffle emotions, but emotions of sadness and sobriety. When
and
really
not yak-related mirth.
I'm just desperately trying not to grin like an idiot at a Cenotaph Remembrance Day ceremony.
Crap.
It's right.
Billy Connolly does a wonderful bit about the British national anthem, because it's dire. You know, it's just it needs to be turned up by at least another couple of hundred revs per minute.
Right.
You know, and what he had come up with a wonderful alternative. Now, there's a very, very, very long running British radio drama called The Archers. It's on BBC Radio 4.
Right.
And it has this. In fact, I recently heard it described as aggressively jaunty. This tune. And Billy Connolly was advocating that this should be the national anthem of Great Britain, and it goes da 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 da. It's very, very, very cheerful indeed.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it would make Remembrance Day a whole lot different.
Yeah.
Even
like
without
having
the Axemen.
Yes. It's like having yakety sax as your like "Here Comes the Bride" music at your wedding. You know, something like that. You get the Benny Hill theme song, and it's just nobody wins in that case, or everybody wins depending on who's there.